Dear Lord, we thank you for this new day with new mercies and opportunities. Be with our leaders as we discuss the serious issues before us. May we not take lightly the awesome responsibility that our constituents have entrusted to us. As leaders, fill our hearts and minds with your vision and passion for what is good and right. May our eyes not see through a glass darkly, but with your insight, may we see hope and promise of ways to work together. This I ask in the name of Christ. Amen.
Body, could we show our appreciation for our House Chaplain and the courage she shows every day to be here for us and pray for us? Have all members had the opportunity to record the presence? Have all members had the opportunity to record their presence? The clerk will close the roll and record the attendance. Introduction of bills and concurrent resolutions, the clerk will read.
House Bill number 2622 by the Committee on Financial Institutions and Rural Development, an act concerning financial institutions relating to the financing of motor vehicles, enacting the Motor Vehicle Financial Protection Products Act, providing definitions, requirements, and procedures for offering debt waivers and vehicle value protection agreements, administration and enforcement by the Consumer Mortgage Lending Division of the Office of the State Bank Commissioner. House Bill number 2623 by the Committee on Financial Institutions and Rural Development, an act concerning rural development relating to employment in rural areas, enacting the Rural Remote Worker Incentive Act, establishing administrative responsibilities, powers, duties, rules, and regulations, authority with the Secretary of Commerce, providing definitions, requirements, procedures, and incentives, creating the Rural Remote Worker Incentive Fund in the State Treasury. House Bill number 2624 by the Committee on Judiciary, an act concerning civil actions relating to the Protection from Abuse Act, Protection from Stalking, Sexual Assault, or Human Trafficking Act, restraining orders issued pursuant to acts. House Bill number 2625 by Representatives Reese, Carlin, and others, an act concerning elections relating to election crimes, creating the crime of elector fraud and providing penalties therefor. House Bill number 2626 by Representatives Poskin, Byers, and others, an act concerning the Teacher Service Scholarship Program, making concerning appropriations for the fiscal years ending June 30th, 2023, 24, 25, 26, and 27 for the State Board of Regents to fund such scholarships. House Bill number 2627 by Representative Poskin, an act establishing the Aspiring Future Teacher of the Year Scholarship and Grant Program, making and concerning appropriations for the fiscal years ending June 30th, 2023, through June 30th, 2027 for the Department of Education for such scholarships and grants. House Bill number 2628 by the Committee on Transportation, an act concerning the regulation of traffic relating to reckless driving, expanding the definition of reckless driving to include operating a vehicle at a speed of 100 miles per hour or more. House Bill number 2629 by the Committee on Transportation, an act concerning driver's licenses relating to habitual violators, removing mandatory jail time for habitual violator convicted of driving while the driver's license of the person is canceled, suspended, or revoked. House Bill number 2630 by the Committee on Transportation, an act concerning transportation relating to the transportation of radioactive materials, establishing fees for the transportation of certain radioactive materials through and within the state. House Bill number 2631 by the Committee on Appropriations, an act concerning education relating to career technical education, enacting the Career Technical Education Credential and Transition Incentive for Employment Success Act, providing state aid to school districts for students obtaining a credential, establishing the Career Technical Education Credential and Transition Incentive Fund. House Bill number 2632 by the Committee on Children and Seniors, an act concerning children and minors relating to procedures in investigations of child abuse or neglect, requiring a child abuse review and evaluation examination, creating a program in the Department of Health and Environment for the training and payment for child abuse and review and evaluation examinations, defining child abuse review and evaluation providers, networks, and examination, and child abuse medical resource centers. House Bill number 2633 by Representatives Probst, Clifford, and others, an act concerning motor vehicles relating to license plates, providing for the City of Hutchinson and the City of Topeka distinctive license plates.
House Bill 2480 appears on the consent calendar for the first day. Is there objection? Seeing none, it will appear on the consent calendar for the second day. House Bill 2500 appears on the consent calendar for the first day. There is objection. House Bill 2500 will be removed from the consent calendar and placed on general orders. House Bill 2464 appears on the consent calendar for the first day. Is there objection? Seeing none, it will remain on the consent calendar for the second day. Announcements. Majority Leader Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House recess until 12:15 p.m. today.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. We're in recess.
Republicans, we will meet for calendar at 12.
House will come to order. Introduction of bills and current resolutions. The clerk will read.
House Bill number 2634 by the Committee on Corrections and Juvenile Justice, an act concerning crimes, punishment, and criminal procedure relating to conditions of release, release prior to trial, requiring a waiver of extradition proceedings. House Bill number 2635 by the Committee on Insurance and Pensions, an act concerning insurance relating to the Unfair Trade Practices Act, adopting the National Association of Insurance Commissioners amendments thereto, excluding commercial property and casualty insurance producers, brokers, and insurers from prohibitions on giving rebates, discounts, gifts, or other valuable consideration as an inducement to sales. House Bill number 2636 by the Committee on Higher Education Budget, an act concerning the disposition of state real property, authorizing the State Board of Regents on behalf of Pittsburgh State University to sell certain real property in the city of Pittsburgh, Crawford County, Kansas. House Bill number 2637 by the Committee on Insurance and Pensions, an act concerning insurance relating to accident and health insurance pertaining to health maintenance organizations, enacting the Health Maintenance Organization Pre-Authorization Exemption Act, establishing an exemption for certain physicians and other providers from certain pre-authorization requirements when providing certain health care services. House Bill number 2639 by the Committee on Insurance and Pensions, an act concerning retirement and pensions, relating to the Kansas Public Employees Retirement System, employment after retirement, reducing the required waiting period to 30 days for a period ending June 30, 2023. House Bill number 2640 by Representative Osman, an act concerning asset forfeiture relating to criminal forfeiture of property with a value of less than $100,000, enacting the Criminal Forfeiture Act. House Bill number 2641 by Representatives Howell, Bergkamp, and others, an act concerning state educational institutions relating to the fixing of tuition, fees, and charges, prohibiting the State Board of Regents from fixing higher rates for non-residential students. House Bill number 2642 by Representative Topiker, an act concerning courts relating to judges, nonpartisan selection of judges of the district court, allowing a proposition related to the method of selecting judges to be submitted to the voters more than once every 8 years. House Bill number 2643 by the Committee on Federal and State Affairs, an act concerning alcoholic and cereal malt beverages, prohibiting the sale or consumption of such beverages on the premises of any sexually oriented business, prohibiting the issuance of a club and drinking establishment license to persons with a beneficial interest in such business. House Bill number 2644 by the Committee on Federal and State Affairs, an act designating the Sandhill plum as the official state fruit. House Bill number 2645 by the Committee on Federal and State Affairs, an act concerning elections relating to county election officers, ensuring security of electronic data and digital images, requiring digital images of ballots to be open records and searchable by precinct. House Bill number 2646 by the Committee on Federal and State Affairs, an act concerning elections, establishing specifications for paper ballots used in state and federal elections, requiring reimbursement of county expenditures. House Bill number 2647 by the Committee on Judiciary, an act concerning family law relating to legal custody, residency, and parenting time, factors for the court to consider, requiring a court to consider evidence of sexual abuse for the commission of any sex offense against a child, creating a rebuttable presumption against awarding parenting time to a parent who is subject to certain sex offender registration requirements. House Bill number 2648 by the Committee on Judiciary, an act concerning seizure and forfeiture of property relating to property seized by law enforcement officers, offenses giving rise to forfeiture under the Kansas Standard Asset Seizure and Forfeiture Act, requiring a criminal conviction, remitting proceeds to the state general fund, removing provisions making motor vehicles with altered vehicle identification numbers contraband. House Bill number 2649 by the Committee on K-12 Education Budget, an act concerning education relating to virtual schools, prohibiting virtual schools from offering or providing any financial incentive for a student to enroll in a virtual school. House Bill number 2650 by the Committee on Children and Seniors, an act concerning health and health care, relating to healthcare providers, permitting advanced practice registered nurses to sign do not resuscitate orders or directives.
House Bill 2569 is withdrawn from the Committee on Taxation, referred to the Committee on Financial Institutions and Rural Development. House Bill 2620 is withdrawn from the Committee of Corrections and Juvenile Justice and referred to the Committee of Judiciary. Speaker recognizes the Majority Leader on a motion to resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for the purpose of considering those items under the heading of General Orders.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion carries. The Chair appoints Representative Hoffman to chair the Committee of the Whole.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Our first and only item on business today is Senate Bill 347. So for the purposes of carrying Senate Bill 347, I recognize Representative Tarwater.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There were committee amendments, and I move the adoption of the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. Motion passes. Committee report is adopted. You may continue.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today we're here to talk about House substitute for Senate Bill 347. This bill was brought to us by the Department of Commerce, and they are in the Senate Commerce Committee. I'd like to first thank the Commerce Committee, the House Commerce Committee in particular, for all the hard work you guys did, especially the Judicial Chair and Speaker Pro Tem, who really spent a lot of time on this bill to make it what it is today and make it right for all of us. This bill concerns a massive economic development program designed to entice investments of over $1 billion. It's called the Attracting Powerful Economic Expansion, or APEX program, and it's under the purview of the Secretary of Commerce to attract large capital investments in new facilities and companies that establish new headquarters in Kansas and hopefully bring their supply chain with them. Bill would provide tax incentives to invest at least $1 billion. Kansas has a lot of very good incentive programs, and for the most part, they work. Where we fall short is when we're attracting companies that need to invest billions of dollars. Our current program allows for a tax credit of up to 10% for 15 years, and they can sell it if they can't use it, but they can only sell half of it. And so that puts us behind the times in negotiating. The hypothetical company that we keep hearing about is willing to make a $4 billion investment in the state of Kansas. This would put us in the running and probably get us that particular deal. What this bill provides is a 15% refundable tax credit that would be paid over a 10-year period in 10 payments after the investment was made. They have a payroll rebate of up to 7.5% in 10 years. It could be 10% if the secretary comes to the State Finance Council, and the State Finance Council sees that it's a wise thing to do to help get the deal and that our budget can sustain it. These are paid over a 10-year period, and that seems like a long time, but the most important part is that they'll be able to capture the actual credit versus our current programs. Being that we're paying the sales, or the 7 to 10% of their payroll, we found it important to have a longer payout because if these employees, whether they live in Kansas or not, we're gonna collect 3.5% to 4% on payroll for payroll taxes. We're gonna reimburse the company 7.5% to 10%, and so we're kind of at a loss there. So that means that if all of these individuals spent all of their money in Kansas, we might break even for the first 10 years. That's why we wanted to try to draw out the payments. The initial bill called for 3-year payout, and that was just too damaging for the budget. This bill also includes reimbursement of a percentage of relocation incentives, because these companies, for 4,000 employees that we hear about and 4,000 employees in the supply chain, they're going to need to bring people to Kansas. This has an incentive to bring them actually to Kansas and not a surrounding state, so that if we help them relocate, they'll be Kansans. They'll pay property tax. They'll do business in Kansas. Those businesses will thrive. Those businesses will pay income tax on their profits. And so, chain reaction. We also have a 50% match for education and training expenses. It's capped at $5 million a year for the qualified firm. That's the parent company that comes. These employees, we wanted to make sure that if we were going to pay part of the payroll, that these employees actually worked in Kansas. So we made a definition for the employee. A qualified employee is defined as an individual employed by a qualified firm or a qualified supplier at a qualified business facility project site and works full-time. That way, we're not paying people in other states that aren't here or other countries that aren't here. The suppliers. These companies would be allowed to choose up to 5 suppliers that they'll bring a lot more than that, but they can choose 5 suppliers that would benefit from this program as well. Those qualified suppliers would have to have a minimum of $10 million in sales of tangible goods or chemicals or sub-assemblies that are located in Kansas. And that's one of the changes that we made when the bill came to us. The supplier manufacturing didn't actually have to be in Kansas, and we felt it important, if we were going to let them participate in this program, that they actually manufacture in Kansas. They have to sell $10 million of sales to qualify. Their investment tax credit is also refundable. It is only 5% of the first $50 million, and then they can add on to that 1% at a time for every $10 million up to $100 million investment. Both the supplier and the main firm would get a tax exemption for the building process. The supplier gets to keep up to 65% of the withholding tax for their employees in Kansas, and that's similar to our PEAK program. The suppliers also can participate in training, but they're limited to $250,000, 50% share, up to 5 years. Because we're focusing on a new business and we're bringing a new shining star to Kansas, they're going to compete against our current businesses. And so we thought we would take some of the revenue generated by these companies and buy down our corporate tax rate that's just simply too high. We have one of the highest corporate tax rates in the nation, much higher than our surrounding states, and our next door neighbor just announced that they're going to cut theirs. And so for each qualified firm that's contracted under this deal, we will reduce the tax rate for corporations by 0.5%. And there's a sunset in this. The sunset says that only one firm per year for 2 years can be contracted. Also, well, that would cap the reduction at 1% total for corporate income tax under this bill. Also, the State Finance Council would be able to review and approve any deal that's done. We felt that was important because what we saw in appropriations when we looked at this original plan, it really was detrimental to our budget. And we thought it was important that the Ways and Means and appropriation chairs were able to put eyes on this and basically bless the deal. They shouldn't slow down the deal because they're involved in the process usually anyway. And they can approve this deal before it's offered or after it's offered. There's nothing in the bill that limits any of that. With that, I'll stand for, I have 2 amendments. The first one is technical in nature.
Can I see the amendment? Is it short? Amendment appears short. The clerk will read.
Page 3, line 35 after is by inserting granted. On page 6 by striking all the lines 22. And line 25 after thereto by inserting. And number 5, reimbursement of a percentage of relocation expenses and incentives for relocation of employees to Kansas pursuant to sections 12 and 13 and amendments thereto. On page 10 in line 20 after firm by inserting or qualified supplier. In line 21 after firm by inserting or qualified supplier. On page 63 in line 13 after or by striking is and inserting are.
Would you like to explain your amendment, please?
Yes. In committee, we gave the reviser permission to make technical changes to make sure that the bill was correct. As good of a job as they did with this bill, there were still a few items that needed to be fixed at the last minute, and so they brought it to my attention, and that's what this amendment does.
Does any member wish to speak on the amendment? Yeah, Representative Clayton.
Thank you. Could the carrier of the amendment stand for a question, please? Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you tell me, just help the committee of the whole understand what does this fix? Walk us through this, please.
Again, it was brought to my attention that they had or and in certain places, and I mean, it was a technical amendment. I don't know what else to say. You're welcome to read it.
Oh, no, thank you. I have. I just wanted to make sure, just we're all a little punchy here, so circle of trust. All right, thank you.
Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Or Mr. Chairman, I apologize. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe Speaker someday. This technical amendment is reflective of the entire history of this bill. It wasn't ready for prime time when it came here. It wasn't ready last week. It certainly wasn't ready when it came out of the Senate. It was drawn up in back rooms and in the dark of night. And now the carrier of the bill offers a quote-unquote technical amendment and doesn't know what it is or what it does. That's what's going to be the case if and when we take final action on this bill. We don't know what it is or what it does. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Seeing none, Representative, you may close. Representative, you may close.
I'd like to thank the previous speaker for pointing out the fact that the governor gave us a bill that needed a lot of work and asked for it to be put in the first day of session, heard the second day of session, passed out the second day of session, put on the floor the third day of session, and passed out and signed. I don't feel like I owe anyone an apology for slowing it down. I don't know what kind of rate that person charges as an attorney, but I would think they would be able to read the law. With that, I close.
You've heard the motion by Representative Tarwater to amend. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion carries. You said you had another amendment?
Yes, sir, I do.
This amendment appears long. Would you like to explain your amendment?
Yes, sir. Yesterday, in appropriations, we looked at how this bill would affect the budget. All along this process, I have cautioned the committee to make sure we knew what this did and what kind of impact this had. We've never, to date, we've always offered large incentive packages, but they're always against future income as far as sales tax that we might receive or not, or wage taxes that we would receive. We pledged those towards these. This is the first time that we've asked to do a bill this big, with this big of an incentive that is a refundable tax credit. A lot of people don't understand what that means. That means if there's a $4 billion investment, we owe $600 million right now, whether we ever receive anything or not. And we won't for quite some time. We won't reap the benefits. It comes out of general funds. So finally, we brought it to the Appropriations Committee to look at the governor's proposed budget and this bill adding to the proposed budget. In just a few years, the budget would be a negative $400 million if we went with the proposed 3-year payout program that the governor wanted and her proposed budget. That's when it started making sense to people. It showed it on paper. We looked at the Senate changes and it was a little better, but it also didn't allow for the refundable tax credit that's really needed to negotiate with these kinds of companies. So yesterday in Commerce Committee, we did the same thing. We looked at the House, what we were proposing over a 10-year payment. In that same year, we are $280 million to the positive. It's a $700 million swing in that 1 year just by delaying the payments. I got a little, maybe too mindful of the general fund because I was thinking about a $4 billion deal the whole time because that's what we're told. In the underlying amendment that we passed earlier that day, we allowed for the Finance Council to take a close look at this and they could make the decision whether or not it made sense to lower it to less than 10 years. They got to view the deal, got to look at the budget and make a decision. I made an amendment trying to protect the general fund, and I took that decision out of the Finance Council's hand. What I wasn't thinking about was a smaller deal. Let's say there's a $1 billion deal that we could really afford and we could pay it over a 5-year or 6-year, 7-year period. My amendment precluded that from happening and it might cause us from not being able to negotiate with the smaller type investments. And so what this amendment does is corrects that mistake that I made yesterday and allows for the State Finance Council to review the deal, look at the budget, and see if it makes sense. It does not change the fact that the State Finance Council gets to review the deal before it's offered. That's what this amendment does. I'll stand for questions.
Is there objection to waiving the reading of the amendment? Seeing no objection. Representative Tarwater, are you done? Okay. To speak on the bill, Representative Clayton.
So I am here to speak on the chairman's second amendment. Normally I don't support, no, I'm just kidding. I really do stand in strong support of this amendment that was drafted. I have read it. Our leader has read it. I believe that it was drafted in good faith with the effort to sustain this base bill, of which I am a very strong, vocal, and emphatic supporter. I urge your enthusiastic support of this amendment and my gratitude to all who spent a great deal of time working together to craft this. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Representative Ralph.
Apologize to the body. I thought I punched my button there. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted the body and in committee and in caucus have heard me make several comments specifically in relation to some concerns that I had about some specific parts of this bill. I just wanted to say that appreciate the chairman's efforts in this regard. The amendment that has been offered alleviates my concerns, offered in the spirit of compromise, and I'll be supporting this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further discussion, the chair recognizes Representative Sawyer.
No, I rise in support of the amendment. I think this is an important change to the bill. I think it's important because it leaves State Finance Council in place, so it leaves legislative oversight. It provides us to have input in the final deal, provides a check and balance, but also provides some flexibility so we're not stuck at just the 10 years. There's some flexibility in there. So I think it's a very important amendment, and I urge your support of it.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Seeing none, Representative Tarwater, you may close.
Thank you. I close.
You've heard the motion by Representative Tarwater to amend. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion carries. We're back on the bill. Representative Tarwater, do you have any further discussion?
I'll stand for questions. Thanks.
All right. Does anyone else wish to speak on the bill? Representative Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would just like to come up, and especially now that this most recent amendment has gone on, I think that we have reached a reasonable compromise. I am very proud and very moved to have worked with the members of the Commerce Committee, in particular those on my side of the aisle who have been working like crazy to make sure that we get something reasonable that does have good oversight and something that honestly gives every single one of us an opportunity to take a good old-fashioned pro-business vote. I urge your strong support of this, and I'll stand for any questions that you all might want to have as we discuss this further. But again, thank you for your support, and most of all, I'm very proud to be a member of the House where we cleaned up a bit of a mess, and I think that we've gotten things in a really good place. Thanks for making me proud, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Please vote yes on this bill.
Chair recognizes Representative Helgerson.
Actually, I just wanted to get down here so I could take off this freaking mask. That's not true. Little levity is always good. You know, in appropriations 39 years ago, I learned a lesson. When you talk about a pickup truck, a used pickup truck in particular, you're going to have all the farmers and all the people out in that everybody knows how much a used pickup's supposed to cost. And, you know, if an agency spends an extra $1,000, you know, everybody's going to scream and say, what do you mean? Why is the Department of Transportation spending that extra $1,000 on that used pickup? I know what that farm sale cost. But when we talk about a $4 billion appropriation, everybody's kind of going, wait a minute now. That happens in the Appropriation Committee. It's happened hundreds and hundreds of times, and it's happened here. I tell you, I don't know if this is a good project or not. I know that we have two different issues, first of all. Is this project for this company what we want to use to try to bring them to Kansas? And is this a project or an economic development tool that we're going to establish? And if we establish it, is it going to continue on? And is that what we're going to do? And is this what we feel is appropriate to give away billions of dollars in the state of Kansas as incentives? Man, I don't know about that one. I looked at the budget as much as anybody in here, and I think we're on, before we even look at the budget, I asked myself, are we going to have good times or bad times in the future? And legislative research and I talk about this all the time. And a few of you on this side and a few of you on this side may also do the same thing. I don't know if we're going to have good times and if we're going to have bad times and whether or not we should commit $4 billion or whatever it is on this figure, but it's awful risky. It's risky to make a conscious decision with this amount of money and this amount of, we're betting the bank. We're betting school finance. We're betting the social service network. And somebody better get down here and just say, are we biting off more than we can chew? Now that we have a reserve account of several billion dollars, it's real easy to think about all the projects we want to spend it on, more highways, more social service, more education. I like to pay off debt. Paying off debt, we get a guaranteed 7.75% return. So while we're putting off this billions of dollars for economic development, I can almost guarantee that I can get 7.75% for paying off the debt that we have built up because we've overspent over the years. If this project was such a great deal, why am I being brought to it? And why did I ask questions today that are just being answered by some emails that I got from the Department of Commerce? This may be a good deal to try to lure whatever this company is, but I really question whether or not this is the time and the place to make major changes in our economic development policies to see if we can bring in the big fish. I don't need to bring in the big fish to have a good state, to have a good economic development policy. We have a good state. We have a growing economy. Don't take the big risks. That's why I'm going to vote against this bill.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the bill? Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And by the way, my apologies to the carrier of the bill. I really did not mean to impugn the effort that he has put into this bill. What I was trying to point out is nobody knows what's in this bill. When I came to this legislature, I thought we had an Open Meetings Act. I thought we had an Open Records Act. I thought it applied to this legislature. But much to my amazement, a few days ago, I learned that members of this legislature signed non-disclosure agreements in order to participate in the deliberations of the legislature concerning this legislation. We don't represent ourselves in this legislature. We represent our constituents. How can you represent your constituents if you have signed a non-disclosure agreement that says you will not tell them what you did or why you supported this legislation? That is wrong. This may be the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. I trust my governor. If she says it's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, I believe her. If I were betting my own money, I might even buy into the deal. But you see, I'm not betting my own money. I'm betting my constituents' money and their children's futures. Do any of you really think that it's the right thing to do to vote to spend, either through tax incentives, SGF outlays, or otherwise, hundreds of millions of dollars and you don't know what it's going for? Somebody told me yesterday, who wasn't subject to this non-disclosure agreement, that the business that this bill brings to the state of Kansas is a pornographic film production studio that will bring thousands of pornographic actors and camera crews to Kansas, that they're going to build a beautiful studio on land owned by Gene Bicknell down near Pittsburgh. You laugh. I will confess to you that the person who told me that was the guy standing in front of the mirror just wondering if maybe that's what this was about. But you see, the problem is you don't know what kind of business you are betting your constituents' tax dollars and futures on. Maybe it's a state-of-the-art chip plant that will solve the demand for chips so that GM can start making, or how about batteries, so GM can start making Chevy Bolts again. But you know, it could just as likely be something that you would really not want in your state. You don't know. The only people who know are the privileged few who signed a non-disclosure agreement and promised they wouldn't tell the rest of us, and they wouldn't tell their constituents who it was, what it was, or where it was. They're the only ones who know. Now, another thing you don't know is who's behind this. Do you know how much money the people behind this idea, the investors who brought this to us, do you know how much money those people gave to the governor's campaign last cycle? I don't know. Do you think it'd be really a good idea in Kansas if people could grease a governor's palm and then have legislators sign a non-disclosure agreement so the rest of us could go pass a bill that the people behind it were really friends of Sam? Or Laura? Or maybe Derek, for all I know. But you don't know either. Did somebody buy this deal? We don't know. Now, I don't want to belabor this, but we don't even know if the people behind this are the Secretary of Commerce's brother. I don't even know if the Secretary of Commerce has a brother, okay? But I do know this, that Kansas has a real bad history of hiring really bad secretaries of commerce. The name Antonio Sauve ring a bell with any of you? Suave? Anyway, I met the man once or twice, didn't like him when I met him.
Representative, could you refrain from using names
I'm sorry, what rule prohibits me from using names other than members of this assembly? I challenge the ruling of the chair.
It's courtesy to not to use the names.
Well, if it's not in violation of the rules, then I will continue to make my points. It doesn't matter what the name is of corrupt people who infiltrate and make their way into public office. Now, I would tell you that I don't think Dave Toland is corrupt at all, but that would offend someone. It would be discourteous. So I will say that I have no reason to question the integrity of the present Secretary of Commerce. I think he's a fine man. But the point of the matter is, you don't know who's behind this. You don't know whether there's somebody greasing somebody's palm or slapping somebody's back. But you're going to go spend your constituents' money on it, on the hope and the prayer, that people who've signed non-disclosure agreements are representing you as a legislator and your constituents, because you can't represent them yourself. You don't know. And finally, the matter of picking winners and losers. As best I understand this bill, and believe me, I don't understand much of it, but as best I understand this bill, it gives the opportunity to certainly the chosen company, which the non-disclosure agreements were apparently entered into with. I haven't even seen the non-disclosure agreements. Somebody ought to ask for them. They shouldn't be a secret. What's in the non-disclosure agreement, just the names of the guilty need to be redacted. And there's supposed to be perhaps one other company that might qualify as well. Who gets in line first? Why do we choose one proposal over another? Why do we shut out other companies, perhaps even local Kansas companies, from continuing opportunities to take advantage of these wonderful opportunities? Well, the reason is because we've already picked the winner, and we don't even know who the winner is. So think very carefully before you adopt this legislation. This legislation, no doubt, has the possibility to do wonderful things for our state. It has the possibility to make us the laughing stock of the country as well. But before you take that kind of a risk, before you go back to your constituents and say, yes, I voted for this, at the very least, you ought to be able to tell them who it is, what kind of a business it is, what's their track record, who's behind it, and who's receiving political contributions or other favors in back rooms to induce legislators to vote for a bill that they don't know who it is, what it is, where it is. So I urge you to think seriously before you vote for this legislation and join me in voting no on Senate Bill 347. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
For further discussion, the chair recognizes Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We asked the question this morning. My screen just went away. We asked the question this morning of, had we lost out on contracts of this particular nature? And the answer was yes. We have been in competition for approximately 11 other large companies to the tune of 58,600 jobs. That's how many we've lost. We were in the running for. I can give you some names. Samsung, Centene, we've had diagnostic companies, we've had distributing companies, and yes, we have fallen behind because we didn't have the incentives. If we want to truly be an economic development state, and we want to look at those tax dollars, this is our time, and this is our option. Now, as an example, when people talk about non-disclosures, having been on a school board for many, many years, oftentimes when we were looking for a new superintendent, we had a non-disclosure clause saying that if we had 4 people, we did not disclose their names because they were working in other districts. They wanted to make sure we were right for them and that they were right for us. And if we put something out and we didn't choose them, then they had to go back home, and it might be a very difficult setting for them. So non-disclosures are not foreign. Have we used them? Not that I know of, but that doesn't mean that they're not in use, because they are, and they're used every day. When we see that we have lost 11 opportunities for multiple jobs in the state of Kansas, who are we hurting? We are hurting us. We are hurting our communities. I believe in our governor, and I believe in our Secretary of Commerce. Our Secretary of Commerce is the first one that has come on board, and in the last 4 years, they have brought over $2 billion in new business to this state. And that was through hard work, consistency, continuity, and building relationships. Let's don't tear those relationships now. The companies I'm talking about that we lost have gone to Tennessee, North Carolina, Texas. I think one went to Oklahoma. 2 of them are non-disclosure. Companies don't want you to know where they are at this time. So is it still going on? It is. But if we want to go farther than where we are today, this is the time to take a step. If we want to stay where we are today, as we are today, that's certainly our choice. But with investment, like for all of us, there is risk. There's risk when you get into the market. There's risk when you buy something and you're not sure about it. I'll guarantee you, my husband bought the first mate of one car, and I think we bought the first mate of every car and everything else after that, and that was a risk because a lot of them have failed. And I'm sure you've had that experience too. And if any of you need a video recorder that weighs 40 pounds, let me know. And the light is so hot it makes you sweat. We have the first. I still have it. But this is being honest with what we want for our constituents and for our state. Is it a risk? Yes, it is. But all of the other states that have taken this risk are not unhappy. They are prospering. And if we don't open our door, we will not get another try. I hope you will support this bill. Thank you very much.
Further discussion, the chair recognizes Representative Wagner.
Colleagues, I really appreciate the effort that the House Commerce Committee has put into this bill. It's decidedly a much better bill than what the Senate delivered to us in their haste. I appreciate how they have broadened the concept where they're actually changing, if such a deal would go forward, there would be a benefit to all corporations in a one-time drop of the corporate tax levy. I think there's a number of things that have made this better, but still. In calendar, the fiscal note that we were given in the Republican side was a $1.2 to $1.5 billion fiscal note. You also had, the chairman said basically for 10 years, this is a cash negative project for the state general fund. The question of taking the historic cash balance that we're faced with right now, which is basically $3 billion, and with a number of changes, this being one of them, that we could drag it down to almost zero in 3 years is very troubling. The fiscal note brought to my mind an article, actually all of you would have gotten from the National Council of State Legislators, would have been an email today about how states are handing out big incentives for electric vehicle factories. And it brought to my mind the fact of what exactly is Kansas doing. For instance, the state of Michigan had a $7 billion project that they were offering, they landed with an $824 million incentive package. Georgia had a project for $5 billion that they had in the article $200 million in incentives plus some workforce and highway changes. Oklahoma has a project mentioned that was 2,000 jobs that was basically $300 million in state incentives. North Carolina had a $1.3 billion factory that it was $315 million in incentives. It seems to me that Kansas is shooting the cannon with an abundance of money as far as a 1.2 to 1.5 billion on a $4 billion project. The Kansas is being extremely generous here, and that bothers me. But I think there's an answer to it, or to that question. The Tax Foundation had a report on state taxation as far as its effective rate for new firms and mature firms. And Kansas stands out in a very negative way. The state of Kansas, if you're a distribution center, a mature, an existing firm, we have the 49th out of 50th worst tax rates. For shared services centers, we're 50 out of 50. For a data center, we're 50 out of 50. For a technology center, we're 49 out of 50. For a capital-intensive manufacturer, the state of Kansas, from the Tax Foundation, is 50 out of 50. We have the worst effective tax rate, taking the totality of your corporate tax rate, your property tax rate, the various taxes that would intersect with any sort of company. But for new firms, for brand new firms, taking into account, I guess, the current incentive packages, we're actually number 2 for capital intensive. So we're actually very good. For labor intensive, we're number 3. For distribution centers, we're number 3 in the nation. The point being that if we had the mature taxation fixed, we wouldn't have to be so heavy on the incentives to get new companies to locate. I will actually, if you'll bear me, it's a great discussion. Here's what their little page thing on Kansas said. It said tax burdens in Kansas are slightly below average for new firms and among the lowest in the nation for new manufacturers and distribution centers. But Kansas ranks worse in the nation for mature firms. Kansas offers very low tax costs for new capital and labor-intensive manufacturing operations and new corporate headquarters, due partly to the PEAK program. But such generous incentives, however, keep tax costs for mature firms much higher than they would be if the tax burden were distributed more equitably. The state ranks 49th or 50th for all mature firm types except corporate headquarters, which we rank 38. I think the problem with Kansas isn't our incentive program. The problem with Kansas is our existing tax structure for businesses. There was some great questions raised about clawback. I mean, if you're a new industry coming to Kansas, you see what the Tax Foundation is saying. I mean, it's like, yeah, I'll come here initially, but as a mature firm, I'm going to be at a total headwinds because of the overall state and local tax rates. The notion that you would come and then leave actually has a certain economic sense to it. And it's certainly something we should actually be fearing because of what you see here. I don't think Kansas is falling behind. I think Kansas needs to fix what's wrong. And what's wrong with Kansas is not our incentive programs. What's wrong with Kansas is our existing tax policy for manufacturers, for small businesses, for the people who have been carrying the burden for Kansas taxes for the last generations. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the bill? Representative Delperdang.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could the carrier of the bill stand for a few questions? I appreciate it. Just trying to get some things cleared up in my mind. We've been talking about other things going on in the state, so I'm just kind of curious, if this passes, we're staying here a week from now and it's passed, what happens to the possible food reduction plans?
So that depends on the Finance Council, who would have oversight of this first deal, of any deal really, but I would imagine that would be part of the negotiation, because when you put this deal inside the current governor's budget, it crashes in 3 years based on what they wanted. My guess would be that that would be part of it. What does she want to give up to get this deal? I would imagine that would be certainly part of the discussion, yes.
Okay. Same token, if we're sitting here a week out and this thing is passed, what happens to our hopes and desires to put a big payment into the Capers system?
I would imagine that that would all be part of the negotiations. I mean, there's $1 billion out there between a $250 giveaway to every citizen and the food tax. That's $1 billion that you have to negotiate with. And, you know, we'll do some of that in appropriations, but I would certainly hope that that discussion would happen in negotiation on giving a company some incentives.
And I am assuming the same is true for any rainy day funds or, you know, the efforts from several in this body for Medicaid expansion. I'm sure the same goes the same way, though. So as you get into the bill, on page 10, line 27, section H2, it stipulates confidential financial information shall not be subject to disclosure. If that's the case, how do we, in the state of Kansas, how do we track our financial investments?
That particular phrase, the confidentiality, is be the company's finances that would be reviewed to make sure that they could withstand the investment. And sometimes those things are kept confidential. A lot of times it's a public company and they're not, but if it's a private company, they would want their financials to remain confidential, even though we were able to review them to make an educated decision.
Furthermore, page 12, lines 24 through 28, total qualified investment shall be completed within 5 years. That's my understanding, that's $1 billion. If it is not completed, the firm shall repay all state tax credits received at that point. So at the 5-year marker, with what we think is going down here, approximately, how much is the state of Kansas going to have invested, including the payroll reimbursement incentives that show up on page 16, line 23?
Okay, so thanks for asking that question, because it allows me to kind of explain how things work. There'll be an initial investment. Let's take the $4 billion that we're talking about. The first year they might spend $1 billion. And the way the bill's written right now is that $1 billion would be there'd be a tax credit of $150 million paid over the next 10 years. Then the next year there's another $1 billion. That's paid over another 10 years. Then the next year, and over 5 years, it adds up, but it's drawn out. And so that's the kind of beauty of drawing it out, is that if they don't hit their targets, we don't really have to claw things back. We could stop paying them. It's more difficult to go get the money than it is to just say, okay, you didn't qualify, so we don't have to pay you anymore.
And that may answer one of my next questions here, because I was going to lead into what if the company is not capable of doing the repayment? Is there any escrow set up? But it sounds like we're paying them in steps. Is that?
So if the company cannot finish the investment, they will have a bond in place that would make the payment in order to finish the investment, which is another reason that we need to review their financials to make sure that they can withstand it.
And I appreciate you answering these questions. I talked to some earlier about a little story with a computer company up in Iowa. It was taken under the Sioux Gateway Commission several years ago. Became Gateway Computers, and they were just going gangbusters. They put up a huge manufacturing plant, hired thousands of people. Real estate prices in the towns around it just skyrocketed, and things were going well up until around the Y2K, and suddenly the computer sales dropped off. The company ended up basically going under, and none of us have Gateway Computers on our desk anymore. So it's just, if we knew exactly what we were business-wise voting on, it'd be a little more confident. But I understand too, Senate Bill 347 is meant to be more of a generic bill. I don't think it's tailored toward one specific company, but hopefully setting the state up moving forward. But I'm just bugged because I usually walk into this room on the various bills and votes, and I know ahead of time before debates pretty much what I'm going to do, and I'm still struggling with this. But Mr. Chair, thank you for letting me speak.
Further discussion, the chair recognizes Representative Tim Johnson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This is an interesting concept. I do not speak against the finances of this bill whatsoever. I commend the groups that have worked on it. It's well beyond my ability to understand. I do represent the 38th House District, which includes DeSoto, Gardner Lake, Basehor, and areas in Leavenworth County. And very uniquely, a short time ago, I began to get calls from my constituents who are asking me questions about certain things that were happening with their city government in the Johnson County section, wanting to know. And so I met with people. I have attended city council meetings in that area. I have attempted to come up with information. I swear it was like the day I asked my dad, where do babies come from? Nobody wanted to talk to me. Nobody would tell me anything. Why did we redistrict? Why did we rezone? Why did we ask for special compensation from the county for grants? But I will tell you, because I walked my 38th district in the Johnson County area, they do not want development in that region involving their city. They spoke very strongly in large numbers. They told me. Now, it was very interesting, since still nobody's telling me where babies come from. You follow the money, and I have a pretty good idea what's up in that region. So one little question I ask, where? The one spot I do know about that would be ideal, I wonder if it would meet federal clearance for munitions. I have two sons that did bombs and ammunition in our military. If that was the spot, has it been cleaned up? Does it meet standards, or will we be facing multi-million-dollar cleanup in the future? I can't vote for this bill because of the people that I told I would represent them. So I will be voting against this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the bill? Representative Auerkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We do have an opportunity today. I think first, let's take a look at what we're doing, right? We're asking Kansas business owners, Kansas taxpayers across the board to pay for somebody else's business investment, to pay for, I mean, this is a direct check out of the state general fund, right? It's a refundable tax credit. That means the taxpayers are paying this business directly for their business investment, for their employee salary, for their employee training, for their employee relocation costs. It's shocking to me. It's interesting, just about 4 minutes ago, I got a phone call. It's from a Kansas manufacturer, moved their manufacturing business here from New Jersey, I think in 1998. This business is a supplier to my job that feeds my kids. So I said, "Hi, Patrick, how's it going?" He said, "You busy?" I said, "I got a quick minute. I'm on the House floor. We're debating the big Eco-Devo giveaway bill." He goes, "Oh, no." I said, "Any words of wisdom? Anything you want me to say?" He said, "Yeah." And this is coming from a guy whose dad built his business in New Jersey in his basement, built it from scratch. Now I think this company has almost 80 employees here in Kansas. A lot of blood, sweat, and tears went into that, their own. He said, "Francis, tell them that if a business can't make it on their own, they shouldn't be asking others to pay for it." He said, "I'll give you a little example. Here locally, we had a grocery store that got started, but it couldn't get finished. And so we needed, we're looking for grocery stores to come in and finish that project. So there were a couple grocery stores looking at it. One came in and said, 'Yeah, I'm kind of interested, but guess what? The city's going to have to pay for this. The city's going to have to pay for that.' And a bunch of different things. The city refused. A lot of people were upset. But within a few weeks, another grocery store chain came in and said, 'We'll take it. You don't have to give us anything.' And they now run a beautiful store. Over the last few years, whether it's the mandates, the shutdowns, the unemployment dollars lost, Kansas business have taken a lot of hits. I could say that they're a little bit disappointed in some of the actions of their state government. We do have an opportunity, though, here today that is unique. We can vote no, and we can say to Kansas taxpayers and Kansas businesses, we believe in you. We're not going to take your money and give it to somebody else, try to attract somebody from outside of the state. We believe in you. And we're going to do a better job with the functions of state government, and we're going to try to lower your tax burden so you, Kansas businesses, can keep some of your hard-earned money to reinvest in your business and grow it within the state boundaries. It's a great opportunity. I think it'd be an encouraging thing for the people of Kansas to hear us say no to taking their money and paying it out to who knows where. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the bill? Seeing Representative Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Will the chairman answer some questions, please? Could you explain to me on page 5, starting on line 26 to 31, what this is talking about, please? Of the bill.
This is under the training and education eligible expenses, and it can, where we split 50-50 on the company expenses, an allowance of $120 per day for food or meals and $300 per night for hotel lodging.
And is that on line 31 of page 5, is that taxpayer money?
Yes, it would be.
$120 per night for food a night?
Asked and answered. Yes.
Per day?
Yes.
$300 per night for hotel costs or lodgings?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, sir.
Yeah.
But I don't know who eats $125 worth of food. I mean, you can sometimes speculate, but $125 worth of food per day is quite a bit of money. And I don't know if this taxpayer dollars is supposed to take people on vacation with their families, or $300 per night for a hotel. But I do have an amendment that I'd like to introduce.
Can I see the amendment appears short, the clerk will read.
Page 5, line 31, by striking $120 and inserting $60. Also in line 31, by striking $300 and inserting $150.
Well, this is just to play along with the game amendment. What it does, it strikes out $120 and makes it $60 a day for food, which is still a lot of money, and $150 for hotel costs. So I stand for questions.
Does anyone wish to speak on the amendment? Seeing none, Representative Jacobs, you may close. Oh, I'm sorry. Representative Tarwater.
I got a question for you, if you don't mind. Does this keep the company from paying more, this change?
Paying more than the $120 per night and more than 60?
So the reason I ask, I noticed this as well, and this is up to and a maximum of what we would pay to reimburse them. The company they still have to pay 50%. They would negotiate a good rate, I would think. However, if they were to have, say, in an area, 16,000 construction jobs brought into one area of the town, hotel rooms could get kind of expensive. And I just want to make sure that we're not precluding them from buying hotel rooms and having us reimbursed. I don't have any problems with cutting these in half at all. I think it's a good idea, but I just want to make sure we're mindful of not going too far and not allowing the company to actually buy hotel rooms on their own.
Okay, thank you for the question. Honestly, if it was up for me, I would actually strike out all of that language and not have the taxpayer pay for any of this company's money. But I'm giving it to the will of the body if they would like to strike this in half or keep it at its current rate.
Anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Representative Jacobs, you may close.
I close.
You've heard the motion by Representative Jacobs to amend. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. No. Ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. We're back on the bill. Anyone else wish to speak on the bill? Seeing none, Representative Tarwater, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. and thanks for the lively debate. There was something I wanted to address about the non-disclosure part of this, and I understand that the messaging is kind of confusing here. I'd like to ask the body to focus on this as an incentive tool that we need, that we could use to attract companies. It's unfortunate that at the same time we're developing this tool, that we're also negotiating with a company that could use the tool. And if any of you know anything about or have been involved in any kind of negotiations for an incentive package, there's always a certain level of confidentiality that needs to be there because they're negotiating with other states. They don't want their employees to know yet that this is coming. Whatever the reason may be, there's always non-disclosure statements until the deal is consummated and then announced. And so when people ask you about that, you know, that's the answer. The messaging is confusing. We're not building this for one company. We may not even get the deal that they're trying to get. But we are creating a good tool to possibly get it into the future. By only allowing one deal this year and one deal next year, we kind of put the secretary in a position of a pretty good negotiating spot. He's only got one to offer this year, so he could negotiate a better deal for Kansas. If there's 2 or 3 companies that are looking for something, then there's 2 or 3 companies, and he doesn't have to go as deep. Currently, 62% of our graduates leave the state. And when they're polled or interviewed, they state there's really not a good job that in their area, engineering or whatever it may be. We lose a lot of our talent after we invest literally hundreds of thousands of dollars, K-12, in college. It's my belief that a company such as this coming in, offering 4,000 high-paying jobs, bringing new industry to Kansas, not unlike the aviation. This could give us an opportunity to own a new market. It could give our students an opportunity to stay here and work for a company that they are proud of and the job that they kind of want. That's hundreds of thousands of dollars saved per student. I'd also ask you to think of the commerce that it could create in the initial ramp up. We're told that Wichita State did a study. They signed the NDA, and they looked into this company. They did a study. They think it will create 116,000 temporary jobs all the way down the supply chain. 6,000 of those will be construction. Most of them will be in our hotels, thousands of hotel nights, tens of thousands of hotel nights. That will create an economic revenue for the state of Kansas outside of this deal. And while we're using taxpayer dollars to attract a company, this really could be something that would be transformational for the state of Kansas going forward. Hopefully we'll look back on this day one day and say, hey, that was a really tough decision, and it was difficult for me to explain, but I had some trust in someone, and I made a vote that I otherwise may not have, and I'm glad that I did. With that, I'll close. Thank you.
Would you like to move your amendment, or move the bill as amended?
Yes, I would. Let me see, I've got the right writing here. Mr. Chair, I move when the committee rises and reports, it reports House sub for SB 347 favorably for passage as amended.
You've heard the motion by Representative Tarwater to report Senate Bill 347 favorable. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay? No. Ayes appear to have it. Division's been called. The clerk will open the roll, and every member may vote. Has everyone had the opportunity to vote? The clerk will close the roll. 81 in yea, 40 nay. The yeas have it. It is passed. This concludes the general orders. The chair recognizes the majority leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move we rise and report.
You've heard the motion to rise and report. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. We are rising to report.
The clerk will read the committee report.
Mr. Speaker, your committee of the whole recommends House substitute for Senate Bill 347 be passed as amended.
Speaker recognizes Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the committee report.
You've heard the motion to adopt the committee report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The committee report is adopted. Reports of standing committee. The clerk will read.
Committee on Corrections and Juvenile Justice recommends House Bill 2215 be passed. Committee on Calendar and Printing recommends on requests for resolutions and certificates that requests by Representatives Curtis, O'Habathan, Williams, Ballard, Delberdang, Proctor, and Kelly be approved, and the Chief Clerk of the House be directed to order the printing of said certificates and the drafting of said resolutions. Calendar and printing.
The chair recognizes Majority Leader to adopt the calendar and printing report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move adoption of the calendar and printing report.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. I'd like to return to introduction of bills. Is there objection? Seeing none, the clerk will read.
House Bill number 2651 by the Committee on Judiciary, an act concerning the Uniform Act regulating traffic on highways, relating to fees, fines, court costs, permitting people to petition the court for a payment plan.
Body of stand at ease. The chair recognizes Representative Hawkins for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Rule 2311, I move that an emergency be declared and that Senate Bill 347 be advanced to that order of business, final action on bills and concurrent resolutions.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Motion carries. Final action. Final action on bills and concurrent resolutions. The clerk will read.
House Substitute for Senate Bill 347 by the Committee on Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development, an act concerning economic development, enacting the Attracting Powerful Economic Expansion Act relating to tax and other incentives for projects in specified industries or foreign national corporate headquarters with specified capital investment requirements of at least $1 billion, providing for a refundable income, privilege, and premium tax credit for a portion of such investment, reimbursement of certain payroll costs and training and education costs, retention of certain payroll withholding taxes, sales tax exemption for project construction, adjusting the income tax on corporations by reducing the rate of 5% after a firm enters into an agreement under this act, limiting the number of agreements under this act with a qualified firm to 1 per year for 2 years, requiring State Finance Council approval of agreements, providing for reports to legislative committees, establishing the Attracting Powerful Economic Expansion Payroll Incentive Fund and Attracting Powerful Economic Expansion New Employee Training and Education Fund, and Attracting Powerful Economic Expansion Kansas Residents Incentive Fund.
This constitutes final action on Senate Bill 347. The clerk will open the roll. You may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Representative Howe, on explanation of vote.
Mr. Speaker, I vote no on Senate Bill 347. My thoughts on this matter are best summarized in an excerpt from Bruce Hornsby's song, "Look Out Any Window." Far away they bend the rule so secretly, close their eyes and let it all out into the sea, hoping nobody else would see. Look out for the big boys, telling you everything they're going to do. Look out for the fat cat builder man, turning this into a wasteland. Look out for the backroom boys that say the smoke is going to blow away. Look out for the men who say it's okay, sitting in a building far away. Representative Howe.
Representative Jacobs.
Speaker, from the quote of someone who shouldn't be too famous, it says this: "But we have to pass the bill so you can find out what is in it, away from the fog of controversy." But one of my favorite persons had said this, Ronald Reagan: "Government is not a solution to our problem. Government is the problem. Government does not solve problems, it subsidizes them." This is why I vote no.
Representative Tim Johnson.
I vote no on Senate Bill 347, not because of the financial bill, but because the implementation of this will negatively affect my district and goes against the people's wishes in the 38th District. Representative Johnson.
Any further explanation? Representative, who's that? Representative Collins.
Although I am an advocate of economic development for the state of Kansas, I feel that I should not vote in favor of House Substitute for Senate Bill 347. I would like to see more transparency. I do understand that non-disclosure agreements have their place, but the citizen should know more about who this corporation is. The majority of my constituents that I have heard from on this bill would like to know more. Representative Collins.
Any further explanation of vote? Does any member desire to change? Representative Eric Smith votes aye. Any further changes? Seeing none, with 80 voted in favor and 84 against the passage of Senate Bill 347, the same have received a constitutional majority. The bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Announcements. Representative Osmond replaced Representative Henderson on House General Government Budget on Tuesday, February 8th only. Further announcements. Representative Hubert.
Education Committee, we are meeting immediately. We have a quick hearing with one conferee who is out of state, so if you could join me in the room immediately. Thank you.
Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Democrats, we will have agenda tomorrow morning at 8:30 in 152 South and WebEx, 8:30 tomorrow. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further announcements. Representative Tarwater for the third time.
Attention Commerce fans, we will cancel our meeting today at 1:30. And we will meet tomorrow. I'll look for your email for our agenda.
Any further announcements? Majority Leader Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Body, that was a lively debate we had. We have legislative Bible study tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. in 142 South. This is sponsored by Representative Riley. Mr. Speaker, I move that Republicans will have a calendar at 8:30 in the old Supreme Court room. Mr. Speaker, I move the House adjourn until Wednesday, February 9th at 11 a.m.
For the motion, all in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. We are adjourned.